Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pat Healy from the Laker News. Tonight, we're presenting, along with FRABA, who's in partnership with us, the candidates form for District 1, Waverley, Fall River, Musquodobit Valley. And so we got 4 rounds of 4 questions each. They each have a 2-minute limit, and we will also have opening and closing remarks to the candidates. We did a draw, myself along with 2 FRABA members, for the different orders that we have set up here tonight. I'd like to thank the LWF Hall for allowing us to host here, along with FRABA for coming on board to partnership, and of course the candidates for agreeing to do this with me. Initially, my idea was just to do a question and answer in the Laker, on the Laker website, but then it came to either Zoom or do a Facebook Live. So I had a friend, Matt Dagley from Dagley Media, who was available, and we decided, but let's do a Facebook Live so we can reach all of the district. District 1, Waverley, Fall River, Muscadabid Valley. So the order that they're sitting is Cathy Deagle-Gammon, then we have Art Wamback, then we have Councillor Steve Streatch, then we have Steve Camperman. So to begin the opening remarks, we will go to Steve Streatch, then Art Wamback, then Steve Camperman, then Cathy Deagle-Gammon. Let's begin.
Well, Pat, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in tonight. When Pat first approached me and talked about doing a live event, I gave great consideration to it. And I think before we start, we all owe a great debt of gratitude to you, Pat, and to the Laker, especially since you've taken over as owner over the last few months and the great work you're doing here in the community. As well to FRABA, the Fall River and Area Business Association, for co-sponsoring this event this evening. Where this is live, I decided that tonight I wasn't going to write a speech. It's very easy for politicians or any of us as candidates to prepare and read a written speech. But I think in an impromptu situation like we have here this evening, it makes sense for me to talk to you rather than talk at you. I've been in elected politics since 1999. I have seen many things, witnessed many changes throughout the municipality. And I want to tell you first and foremost, it has been a great privilege to represent the residents here in Fall River and Waverley, Muscodobit Valley, and the whole district encompassed here in District 1. 2020 has been a year like none other, and it is a year we will not soon forget. COVID-19, the ensuing pandemic, has created many, many complications, not only for you and your families, but indeed for Regional Council. The knowledge I have gained over the years, and indeed the business background that I bring with me, I believe bodes very well for us today and into the future. Folks, this is time for experience. I offer that, and I ask for your support come Election Day. Thank you.
All right, up next, we will have Art Wamback.
Hello. Good evening. I'm glad to be here with you this evening to share some of my thoughts and responses to your questions and concerns that you labeled out. I entered this campaign a little over 2 months ago when I formally declared my desire to be your representative in the next council. In that time, I've learned a great deal, and I've traveled extensively in the region, and I've met many great people. Meeting those people, we have chatted, you have spoken, and I have listened. I come to this campaign following a long career in the Royal Canadian Navy. I recently retired back in March after 37 years, and I feel I have some unique skill sets and leadership ability that I can bring to the council in the next council. We have called District 1 home for about 10 years now. Both myself, my 2 daughters, my 2 grandchildren are born and bred Haligonians. Currently, I live in Fletcher's Lake with my wife of 30 years and my youngest daughter. My other daughter lives just around the corner in Wellington with her 2 children. As was mentioned, these are indeed challenging times. What we need to do is we need to ensure that we do what needs to be done to ensure economic and social recovery in the post-COVID world. What we need, what you deserve, is sincere, genuine leadership in these challenging times. I believe I am that leader. Thank you.
All right, up next is Steve Camperman.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Pat Healy, FRABA, and the countless volunteers for their time and effort to make this forum possible. So, a little about myself. I was born and raised in Grand Lake Oakfield by great parents and grandparents, and also the community helped as well. My father's grandparents, they were immigrated from Holland, and lately I've been going door to door, and it makes me truly proud when people associate my last name with hardworking, community-oriented family life. Growing up, I was a sportaholic, and not only that, I love to lead. So showing strong leadership, my peers always elected me captain or co-captain. Then, having those leadership skills, I entered the workforce. When I entered the workforce, I was always able to achieve management positions. But knowing I wanted to become more, I decided to become an entrepreneur. I bought a small company, and I grew it to one of the largest property contracting companies in HRM. I sold it. Then I started a new business, which I'm most proud of. I grew an outdoor power equipment business to become the second largest dealer in Canada. Not only that, I was elected by my business peers to represent them on the Dealer Council of Canada. I received multiple business awards. Year over year, some of the world's top companies' CEOs visited me to see what I accomplished in such a small market of Nova Scotia. I have a proven track record, and I know I can be the voice for our district and accomplish goals we set.
Time's up. Next, we have Cathy Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Laker News and FRABA, for putting on this lovely event. It's very exciting to be here, and thank you to everyone who is watching and tuning in. So my name is Cathy Deagle-Gammon. I live in the backyard of this beautiful community hall on Metzler Court. I have been here for 25 years with my husband, Max, and our newly acquired, my husband's Percy. Right, the dog is Max. Messed that one up. Okay, so 25 years here, and I worked my entire life in the nonprofit sector, so I've worked for the public dollar. I understand and respect what the public dollar is all about. I have been recognized locally and nationally as a leader in advocating for social change and workplace diversity. For the past 25 years, I've been the executive director of Dask Industries, and I have been named a Paul Harris Fellow. From the Rotary Foundation, I'm a recipient of the Workplace Diversity Award from Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, the Progress Women of Excellence, and the Canada 150 Award. I'm passionate about community, and I am very involved in our community here in District 1 with the Ratepayers Association, as well as the Lions Express, the Ditch Divers Society that we're just forming with the Hart Brothers, which is an amazing thing. And I am also one of the inaugural persons with the Nova Scotia Nonprofit COVID Coalition. What is really interesting about myself as a candidate is that I bring a business background as well as a social justice background. And the balance of those two things and how we move through COVID and thrive through COVID is one of the things that HRM needs to be mindful of. That's what I can bring as your counselor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to the 4 candidates. We had 50 questions submitted to myself, the Laker News, and we had to narrow it down to 16. So What you will hear next are the 16 pertinent questions that myself, as well as others who are involved and follow politics, decided were the best 16 to ask. So, our first question will go with Art Wamback, and the other counselor or candidates can listen, so maybe I don't have to repeat. With the current infrastructure and traffic problems highlighted in the Fall River Vision Plan, what are the candidates' views for further planning applications and growth for the area? Art.
Thank you for the question. This is one of the biggest issues I've found getting around and talking to people is concern over how the planning and development works in our district. And I agree, there's a lot of it is a communication issue, but we do need to grow. Just the fact that we need to grow doesn't mean we can't keep our roots. I believe that we can expand our housing, we can, in concert with contractors and the community, ensuring that the community visions and the contractor's desires and our own requirements are fully met. What we need to do here is help smooth the process. We need to have a more inclusive process with the community and with the developers at the same table, along with council, to be there and work out the issue so there isn't any miscommunication and bad blood afterwards. I think once everybody understands the process and works with the process, we can get there. What we in council can do to help is help smooth the way on some of this stuff. For it to take years to get a simple building through approval to be built, in my mind, is not necessary. I think we can have, if we do the consultation fully from the outset, and we use the processes in place, we can make this happen. Now, there does need to be some check and balances, and I believe that's where your council comes in. We need to make sure that the developments that are being proposed meet the infrastructure of the city and the area that it's going in, and it meets the needs of the community. In the end, we do need to grow, and I think we can do so to everybody's satisfaction. Thank you.
And next to answer that question will be Steve Streatch.
Well, thank you very much for the question, Pat. You know, I mentioned in my opening statement that I was first elected in 1999, and I can remember sitting beside former Councillor Gordy Snow when we entertained the application by the Sobeys organization down here at the intersection. And my, how things have grown over the last number of years. I believe that the infrastructure in this particular community, and we're talking about Fall River currently, has not kept up with the demand. The lifestyle and the attributes that this area offers has attracted many new people in a very, very short period of time. I was very proud as your councillor to be the member that oversaw the installation of the central water system a couple of years ago into this community. That will make an enormous difference as it relates to future development. Without central water, and we know how complicated a lot of folks had it this summer with wells going dry, then you cannot continue to build in a sustainable way. We also have to invest in our roads and the network of transportation links, not only transit, but indeed relating to traffic authority decisions, for example, turning in and out of the Sobeys, the Fall River Road area. So there is many, many situations that a lot of people maybe don't feel their voices were heard, but that is not the case. There are pending development applications currently. There are 3 designated large development sites still to be looked at here in the area. Right now, there are no decisions by council that are taking us in any direction. Of course, the views and the opinions of the residents are important, but at the end of the day, someone has to make those decisions. And as councillor, indeed a member of regional council, that falls upon your member and council to make those decisions.
Time's up. And next we will have Steve Camperman.
Thanks for the question, Pat. So I believe it all comes down to planning and development. You have to have goals and visions, and the design committee that put stuff in place years ago for the vision of Fall River. Traffic has been alleviated during COVID, and there hasn't been so much traffic, but coming down Fall River Road, along the number 2 highway, people get very frustrated, and with new developments proposed, we have to really ask what the community wants. So in saying that, we do need plans. So holding town hall meetings with communities and seeing the direction of where they want to go. Talking to the councillor, going out in the community and finding out where we should put these things. Should it be in Fall River? Should it be in the new Aerotech connector up by the airport where water is very available? Should we actually put it right in the heart of Fall River? To me, I think we should start thinking outside the box. It's very simple just to let developers pick land and do what they want, but we should question these things. So we've heard on Facebook and other social media sites where people don't want stuff in their backyard. I get people don't want 4 or 5-story buildings right in their backyard, and I probably wouldn't either. So that's where the planning comes. So if we could talk to different communities outside Fall River and just not, let's go towards the more community instead of the high rise. So my vision would be, let's do more planning, talk to the community, think outside the box, and get a better plan. Thank you.
All right, next is Cathy Deagle-Gammon.
Pat, would you mind giving us the question again, please?
All right. With the current infrastructure and traffic problems highlighted in the Fall River Vision Plan, what are the candidates' views for further planning, applications, and growth for the area?
Thank you, Pat. I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to go back and look at what the Fall River Visioning Committee actually put in place and what the status is. We also need to figure out how did that fit within the regional plan, and then what are the actions that are still to be done. So we need to go back and look at that, and then we need to figure out where is the gap and how do we meet that gap. That's one of the things that we need to do. 2008 is when the Fall River Visioning Committee started. So 7 years later, there's been a lot of work. And even if you went through the HRM website to drill down and find out where is the Fall River Visioning Plan, it's a little bit of a journey and it's a deep dive to take. What the Visioning Committee said very clearly around transit was the need for the proper infrastructure to be in place. So we need to look at the roads. We need to look at what is the the transit boundary. We need to look at some engineering studies around these narrow roads that we have so that it's very unsafe for cyclists and for pedestrians. The other thing that we need to look at around development specifically is that there is a mistrust of development because there's a lack of information in a timely manner that tells people what the development is, what the impact is on the community, and whether or not it's the right fit. We also need to figure out how do we support so that the good information is in front of people to make strategic decisions that is acceptable to our communities. All of these developments are great. Everybody wants to come and live in Fall River, Wellington, Waverley, and in Musquodobit. Well, what we need to do is figure out how do we do that in a planned way that fits the community, that has the proper infrastructure, and that allows for the safe enjoyment of our residents. Thank you.
All right, now on to the next question, starting with Art Wamback. Each HRM councillor controls thousands of dollars as discretionary funds to apply to needs across their district. What method would you use to decide which district organizations share in that money?
Thank you for the question. As part of my overall approach to governance and a responsibility to the community, it's essential that we have transparency in how we do our business and full inclusion of the community in the processes. The discretionary spending of the council that's given to the various district councilmen isn't just a pot to be thrown around. It's your money, not the council, not your representative, it's your money. My intent would be to open up a participatory budgeting process, much like we've seen in a couple other districts, which involves the entire community, where people will come to the table with their desires and their recommendations, and the community will decide what they can do within the realms of the possible, the monies that we have. And then the councillor will take that forward as required and work it through the various regulations and policy people with all the dot the I's and cross the T's and get it thrown. But again, it'll be your decision, not your representative's decision on how the money is spent bestly in your area. Thank you.
And Steve Streatch.
Thank you very much, Pat. This is an item that many people discuss, but unlike my opponent, Art, I believe this is the responsibility of your elected member of council to decide where these funds go. We have a huge district here in Waverley, Fall River, Musquodobit Valley, nearly 2,500 square kilometres. And to think it reasonable for folks to come together to make those decisions is wrong-minded in my view. The funds that are allotted, just shy of $100,000 in capital, approximately $5,000 in discretionary, and $4,000 in sponsorship, are spent very wisely, in my opinion, by most councillors. There are 2 or 3 that have gone down the route of bringing others in, but my experience and the feedback I'm getting is that it has been very, very complicated. With the funds that I am allocated on your behalf, and Art is absolutely right, these are tax dollars, and there is full transparency on everything that is spent. Everything is listed on the HRM website, and there are no secrets. I've been able to help our legions. I've been able to help community organizations, youth initiatives, even purchasing defibrillator machines for community groups and volunteer organizations. Many, many projects that would never see the light of day in the normal capital budget process at council. So I believe this is a tool where your member is able, with discretion, to give back to the community and indeed the people that deserve the help and the organizations that need financial assistance. And I believe it is one that I'll continue in the manner that I have for many, many years.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
Thanks, Pat. Discretionary funds for me. So going door to door in this district, it's been, like Steve said, it's a huge district. And for everyone to come together and vote on stuff, I think that's a long stretch. So I particularly think it is good for the councillor to get out in the community, in all small little communities, and see what is needed. I hear, so my thing would be to set the top 3 goals in every little community within a community, to start finding out what everyone wants or needs. Make a spreadsheet, figure it out, start crossing off those goals, what the Scouts want, what the Girl Guides want, what sports teams want, what the Legions want. When I go door to door, I don't see a goal. I don't see a plan. I don't see anything. And this is where a councillor should start stepping up and helping the community. For me, that's where a councillor should thrive. To start making people smile, making them feel welcome in their own communities, and helping out a little bit. It shouldn't be big lump sums. It should be a starter to help a small little group to get it off the ground. That's my vision of the discretionary funds. To help, to get things going, just help one another and make it fantastic in your communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy Deagle-Gammon.
So along with Art, I actually do believe in participatory budgeting for discretionary funds, but I also think that there's a balance because the councillor is the leader and that brings the right people together to help make those decisions possible. There are 47 distinct communities within District 1. I do believe that year over year we'll be able to bring 4 or 5 people together from different regions within the district to sit down and to look at how these funds are attributed and how they are given into the community. I also think this is a place where I can add value as your councillor. 40 years in the nonprofit sector, knowing where funds are provincially, federally, and municipally, also knowing where the foundations are. So bringing those people together and understanding when people need funds, where are the other places that we can get it and how do we leverage dollars. that's the place where I believe your added value will come from me as your counselor.
Thank you. All right, next question, starting with Art. What approaches will you take as counselor for District 1 to minimize the tax burden for the district while sustaining adequate levels of municipally provided service?
Thank you for the question. And again, I go back to my opening remarks about this. It's not the time for the status quo. I believe the tax regime currently in place doesn't really serve our district well overall, and we can do things better. We can't change it overnight by any means, but I believe we need to have a sit down with a formal council or a formal a body selected by the council to look at tax reform municipally. All right. There's been a number of good studies, great ideas, great recommendations, but in my research and my investigations, that's about where it stopped. We can do things better than that. There's a plethora of different little taxes out there that add up, and at the end of the day, it comes on us as residents of the region to pay them. I don't think residents and landowners need to carry the bulk of the burden here. There's other ways and creative ways we can do tax revenue, but we can only do this with a proper examination of the current system and what we need and what it's going to cost for us. And there are many ways of doing that. When we sit down and we do a value-based approach, we can determine how much money we need and then how much taxes we need to collect and where we collect it from. Does it make sense that somebody without a ditch is paying ditch tax? No, it doesn't. Of course not. But we can do that if we sit down and look at it properly with a proper review and do a proper implementation with an action plan that is policed and followed by your council. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you very much, Pat. Taxes, I don't think there's anybody listening tonight or anybody throughout HRM that doesn't feel they pay too much tax. We all share in that view. At the same time, HRM has certain responsibilities. We have certain levels of service that residents demand and request. You know, leading up to COVID-19 back January, February, we had an approved budget and we were ahead of the game. HRM was in real good shape. There was no proposed tax increase. We had a situation that was going to allow for many projects and services to remain at a level that people were looking for. When that all changed mid-March, Council had to go back and redo our entire budget. We had an $80 million gap that had to be closed. There were several initiatives, several projects that had to be either delayed or canceled. And you know, I recall one specifically was the elimination of the weekly green bin collection. And the amount of people that I had call about that was a lot more than I received about the tax bills. So there is a demand, there is an expectation for levels of service. Council tries our best to find that balance. Regional Council and the municipal government has only one source of income, and that is a rate based on the assessment of property. Is that the best formula? Well, maybe it isn't. Art talked about other opportunities. There are those that say we should go back to the days of a poll tax. There are those that say we should have a greater share of the gas tax, which, by the way, we were able to get a number of years ago. Or, like other jurisdictions throughout Canada, that we get greater contributions from the federal government. But right now, the best we can do is balance our books with the funds that we have and be as efficient as possible to provide the services that you, the taxpayers, are demanding every day.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
The question for me,
Okay.
Pat?
What approaches will you take as councillor for District 1 to minimize the tax burden for the district while sustaining adequate levels of municipally provided services?
So that's a heavy-handed question, Pat. It's a very difficult one. Like Steve said, we all don't like to pay taxes, but we all expect lots of services. So what I've been finding going door to door, we just feel like in District 1 that we don't get the fair share of the services for the taxes that we pay. So I understand HRM is going through. They had to rebudget for COVID, and they were in great financial shape, and probably not so much anymore with people not being able to pay taxes and small businesses not being able to afford that. So that's where we have to set priorities and see where we can start cutting taxes, what we need. Do we actually really need green bins emptied every 2 weeks? That's a small little cut. I understand, like, it's nice to have, but to get lower taxes, you have to start cutting a little bit of services. So what is the community willing to give up? But we'd like to see lower taxes. So, as me living in Grand Lake, I get garbage, fire, police, and snow clearing. And our taxes are huge. Not much more different than Sackville, Dartmouth. There's a few $100s in difference. So let's start seeing value for the tax dollars and bring more to the community if our tax rate's going to stay the same. Let's start fighting for those things. More recreational spots, more green spaces, more services, more firefighters. And that's where I think we should start focusing a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you, Pat. So HRM cannot operate at a deficit. That's one of the things that you have to understand from the beginning. One of the things, I actually brought my tax bill, and it's really interesting because we pay the same. There is an urban rate, suburban, and a rural rate. Urban and suburban are the same, and then rural is just a little bit different. Commercially, there's a difference in the tax rate, and then there's the supplemental education rate. One of the things that we in rural in our district that I've been hearing as we're on the campaign trail is that people actually don't mind paying their taxes if they're getting the services that they believe that they're supposed to have. Are they getting the same services that we are in rural? When you're on the peninsula, when you're in some urban areas, what happens is that people are saying we're paying for suburban services. When we're out here in District 1, we're saying we're paying some of the highest taxes and we have less services than anybody else. The very first thing that needs to happen is that we need to understand what percentage of our tax dollar gets us what service. So solid waste, policing, recreation services, planning, libraries, sports fields, playgrounds, street lights, recreation, community facilities. In District 1, many of us would say our tax dollar is not giving us what we want it to do. So it does need to have a review, and we do need to do it in a balanced way. So instead of thinking about how HRM spends, let's change the language to how does HRM invest? So where are we doing our spending within the city? The new social procurement policy that has been adopted is an excellent start to looking at investing in our own small business, our own medium businesses, our own social enterprises. HRM is one of the highest employers as a government as well. So when we look at the taxes and what we get and what we don't get, let's also look at where we invest.
Thank you. All right, next question, starting with Art. How will you work with other levels of government to bring big projects to our district? Tell us about how you'll make collaboration a priority.
One of the things that's essential attribute of your representative is their ability to work with others, i.e. teamwork, participating in different meetings and at different levels of government. I have found that being able to talk at all levels on their wavelength will get you better results than arguing or just sending up letters. My intent would be to ensure that the avenues of discussion are open from both at the municipal level, provincial level, and federal level, with the political representatives in those areas, and as well the regulatory representatives that reside here in Halifax. We can, I think collaborative approaches, teamwork, and relationship building is key to success in this area. And that would be one of my main focuses, is to, because I don't know it all. I don't know half of it probably. But what I do know is how to build a team and how to build relationships. And that's the strength I can bring forward, and that would be my intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. You know, most people don't realize, or maybe don't stop to think, that each level of government has certain areas of responsibility that they are required by mandate to provide and to fund. Here in HRM, we are the lowest on the totem pole. And quite frankly, on many occasions, you have to go to your provincial and federal counterparts to engage in co-funding on projects. Over the years, and I mentioned in my preamble that since first being elected in 1999, I have built relationships with many, many people, many parties, across party lines, different levels of government. And it is one that it has bode well not only for our district, but indeed the municipality as a whole. And to cite specifically one locally here, the water project. Your MLA, Bill Horn, your Member of Parliament, Darrell Sampson, and I worked very closely together to make sure that the co-funding ratios were in place. But you know, the day came at the end of that project when we were $1 million short. And I went to one of my colleagues on regional council who had an approved project, and that would be my friend Steve Adams. And I said, Steve, I need your help. And the relationship that I had built with him and others over the years worked in our favor in that case. And the project he was not able to advance indeed benefited us and allowed us to finish. So you have to work with your colleagues at the provincial and federal government. But you also have to remember that it's the same wallet, the same taxpayer that pays those bills. And it has to be equitable, it has to be fair, and it has to be something that makes sense. And it is a process and a path that I will continue to follow as I have for years gone by.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
Can you repeat the question? Just one.
Yep. How will you work with other levels of government to bring big projects to our district? Tell us about how you'll make collaboration a priority.
Thanks, Pat. So my background in small business and networking and working with others, that's where I strived. So we always found solutions to get things done and had open dialogue. If one part was struggling, another would pitch in and help. And, you know, we never shut out anyone. So that's where it works. And building relationships through all levels of government. Doesn't matter about party or party lines. And that's why I like municipal politics, because it isn't party driven. It's about community driven. And to open those dialogues and talking and getting things done. So in saying that, that's what I would like to do. Thanks, Pat.
Yep. All right. Cathy Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you, Pat. So my best example of working with all three levels of government to attain a goal is the dream that the City of Dartmouth has in the Dartmouth Adult Services Center. We built a $4.3 million facility, went in debt-free, no mortgage. HRM was actually the lead in that project in that they gave us land at less than market value in Burnside. And then the federal government came in and gave us funding, and then the provincial government was the last one in. It's very interesting because the provincial government was, I believe, at the time NDP, and the federal government was Conservative. So working across party lines to attain a goal, that is an excellent example, I must say, and it's one that most of us are very proud of. The other project that I'm involved in that is working across all party lines and all levels of government is bringing the Social Enterprise World Forum to Halifax. It was going to be in 2020. COVID changed it, and so now it will be in 2021, and that's actually working in an international and at a global field. The other option project was the Nova Scotia Framework and Strategy for Social Enterprise, which is the paradigm by which government works with social enterprise and builds small, medium, and community interest companies in this province. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes round one. Now, let's begin with round two. I think we're doing good. Right, people? Right? Cool. All right. Round two, answers begins with Cathy Deagle-Gammon, then it goes Art, then Steve Streatch, then Steve Camperman. All right, here we go. What do you see as the three biggest challenges facing the Musquodobit Valley, and what role do you think municipal government plays in helping to overcome these challenges? Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. So we've spent some time in the Muscodobit Valley, and I will tell you what I've learned, but I would also tell you that there is much that I am still to learn. So I actually have a cousin who lives down there, and she's in the internet desert. We know that working with Develop Nova Scotia, there's an issue there around acquiring and sustaining really good internet so that people can work from home. There's a very interesting gentleman in Dutch Settlement who is co-founder of Placemaking 4G, which is a community interest company that looks at, and they are working globally as well. So being able to work from home in Muscadabit and in that area is really essential. The other thing that I've talked about with some individuals, which was really interesting, is that, what is a concern in Waverley and Fall River and Wellington is still a concern in Musquodobit too. Speeding is a big issue. It's interesting, we can stay the blazes home, but we can't slow the blazes down. So speeding is an issue as well. We got passed on a double line. The other thing that we would like to see happen, and what people have talked to us about, is that to bring together a lot of the nonprofit groups and organizations to figure out how we can scale, share services, share resources, share volunteers, how to be collaborative instead of competitive for the public dollar. That's going to be really interesting. The other thing that we've spoken about a little bit is the talk about a rural economic development board. We have food insecurity in Halifax, but we also have the biggest agricultural belt in our district. There has to be a way that these two can be married together for a good result, addressing food insecurity and supporting our farmers. So a rural economic development board, working more with our volunteer sector, I think that those will be one of the things that Musquodobit has been talking about lately to me, and I'll be very excited to learn so much more about what those needs are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Art.
Musquodobit Valley. Beautiful spot. I'll be honest, prior to this campaign, I've only been out there a few times. No real reason, but I'm glad I've been going out there lately. It's a beautiful spot, but it is vast, and I met some great people out there. I know we go out pretty well every weekend to one of the different vendors markets out there, and we enjoy it very much, my wife and I. And I talk to a great number of people. I believe I've been to just about every community out there now, and talk to people as best I can, and as best as that they'll open up to me, being a townie and all. But what I did here is much like Cathy said, the big one is the internet, and it's great to hear Steve and some of the initiatives that have gotten through over there. That's fantastic. But they got to be part of the 20th century, 21st century. They got to get on the internet. If anything COVID's taught us, connectivity is essential to success, and we'll get that out there. Another one that came up a few times was some sort of transit link. Now, Musquodobit Valley is part of HRM, and HRM has a responsibility for public transportation. Now, it's not realistic to think we're going to have a regular half-hourly service out to Carroll's Corner from downtown Dartmouth, but we can do better than what's there now. We need to have established some sort of regional transportation link capability so people can have ways of getting in to the metropolitan area and getting about through all that. And also economic diversity. I've had a few people mention that if there's more we could do to help with the economic diversity out there, my big thought is tourism. I think that's a beautiful spot. Let's exploit that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. My family has lived in the Musquodobit Valley for over 200 years, so I do know the issues, and I know the people, and I know what is needed in that community. And Art, thank you for mentioning our recent success in having approval for the high-speed fiber optic network. That is going to be a game changer for rural residents, not only in the valley, but indeed all of HRM. I'm very proud of the work that we did over the last couple of years to bring that to fruition, and look forward to overseeing its implementation. Infrastructure and sustainability are other big factors. You know, there are a lot of facilities that have fallen by the wayside. A lot of our young people have decided to move either out west or to more urban settings. We need to find ways to bring new families into rural communities such as the Musquodobit Valley. And when we speak of the Musquodobit Valley, that's used to describe a very broad area. In my view, I usually refer to that as Dutch settlement right through to the county line in Dean. Recreation is another very important thing for the community. I am proud that we have pre-approval for a new recreation facility, including a splash pad for Middle Musquodobit. The other thing is the levels of service that people maybe feel are different between HRM and provincial lines of responsibility. In 1996, when HRM was formed, there was a service exchange agreement that provided that HRM would look after certain things in certain areas and the provincial government would look after other things in other areas. I'm not so sure that our rural communities have been served well by that. And there is now a call maybe to go back and open that agreement up, and I am open to that. As it relates to transportation, we have over the years had many transportation facilities that have not succeeded. But I believe now with the approval the council gave last week for ride sharing such as Uber, that will definitely...
Time's up. All right, Steve Camperman.
Thanks, Pat. So traveling out to Musquodobit Valley, I used to play ball in Musquodobit Harbor and the valley, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But there is challenges. High-speed internet. It's great to see that there's actually an LTE network, not just satellite, that has been brought forward and should be up and running in the next few months. Speeding going down there, it's ridiculous how many people actually pass you on a double solid line. So enforcement is a huge issue for residents down there, especially around the community center and schools. And growing up in a fire department, first responder household, I talked to the firefighters down there, and it's me being one, being a single volunteer firefighter for a little bit in a department, you put the community on your shoulders. You feel like you can't leave the community, so they definitely need some help there with recruitment. It takes way too long for an ambulance to get down to Musquodobit Valley or Dean, just even for a cardiac arrest. We just need to find new ways of bringing families to get to Musquodobit. So like Art said, tourism is a fantastic idea. Musquodobit's gorgeous. Let's create their niche. Let's find their niche. Let's create the hiking or the fishing or whatever it is, the farmer's market or the exhibition. Let's promote Musquodobit Valley. Let's make the city folk drive down for their day trips. That's when people start to experience it. People love the valley, so people should love Musquodobit Valley. Let's just find their niche.
Thank you. All right. The next question is starting with Cathy. What does a community-created planning vision mean to you? What can you tell us about Fall River's vision plan?
The Fall Vision Plan, like I said earlier, like HRM asked, it was started in 2008. So HRM asked different communities to envision what would they look like in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years. And so significant energy from a lot of volunteers came together to look at a vision plan, but then also to make an action plan. There was issues around housing, around economic development, community development, transit, open spaces, green spaces, and I'm sure that there's some more that I'm missing on. But it really was trying to figure out the proper plan and the proper process and the proper kind of consultation that people needed to have around the vision committee. The issue around infrastructure was the central key to having a good vision, and a good action plan that would be associated with that. So that started with the Wellington connector, at the Burnside connector, what's going to happen with there, how that's going to alleviate traffic in our area specifically. And then also it was how to work really effectively with your MLA and with your MP, understanding what programs and services will be supported federally and provincially, and then understanding how you meet that gap within the municipal unit. And I think that's what I'm going to stay with. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Thank you. Vision plans. I've worked with many vision plans over the years, and they are very important, and a community vision plan even more so for us and our local residents. A vision plan, in my mind, is where you want to be, where you like to be, and how you're going to get there. The ones we've had that I've read and I've seen and been exposed to since living here are good. However, a vision plan also has to have a longer-term plan, and it has to accommodate for the reality of demographics and the reality of time changes. I think ours does, but it still does need some work, right? Things do change, and so should visions. Visions need to be modified slightly and tweaked as we go through. But that's easily done. A vision plan written down is great, but it's pointless without a plan of action. And without a plan of action and some oversight of that plan of action, all it is a vision and a wish list. So I would suggest that the communities, with their councillor, can set up some sort of overarching monitoring system and a check and balance system, on some sort of quarterly basis. How's the vision plan going? Are we tracking down the relative for that? Is it working for everybody? And that's what I think about vision plans. But yes, they are important, and I will continue to support them.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you very much, Pat. I'm very familiar with the vision plan that's been referenced. Back, and Cathy mentioned earlier that that work was started in 2008, and I remember voting in support of that plan in 2012. There are over 200 communities here in HRM, and every one of them has a vision plan. Plans help guide council. They help the community understand where they want to go, where they've been, and indeed where they are. At the same time, plans are open to amendments. The recent decision of Regional Council as it relates to the development here on Fall River Road and the seniors facility at the Car Farm is a perfect example of that. Several people that worked on that plan and had a vision at one time, a few years later, thought that maybe an amendment needed to be made. So a public hearing was held at Regional Council, and you have to remember that vision plans are guides. They are not Bibles. They are open to interpretation, and indeed they're open to amendments by Regional Council. Regional Council amends plans every day, whether it be municipal planning strategy, whether it be land use bylaws, or indeed whether it be local vision plans. So plans are very important. That is an important document, and it has to be one that helps guide us as it relates to the other 3 opportunity sites here in Fall River that, as many of you know, 2 right now have pending applications on them. The one in the Ingram area and indeed the one down Wingate. Those will come before the community in the form of a public meeting. They then will come before council for decision. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, decisions have to be made. We may not always agree, but at the end of the day, someone has to make those decisions, and indeed you make them for the right reasons at the right time with the greater opportunity and experience for the community.
Time's up. Thank you. Steve Camperman.
So I'm well aware of the Fall River Vision Committee and their plan that was brought forth in 2008. As being a business owner in Fall River and talking to other business owners, the plan makes it difficult for business owners to be creative. There's the vision of where it was and what it is now is totally different. It limits the development of nice buildings. Take for the number 2 highway. I was very limited of what I could have done on my property just because of the vision plan. It's very hard to fight or tiptoe and run a business if people don't share the same. So I personally think including FRABA and reworking the bylaws of Fall River and the community needs to be looked at as soon as possible. When they first brought it, they wanted Fall River to look like Freeport, Maine. I totally get it. We want it to look beautiful. We want setbacks. We don't want it to look like a fast food runway strip like Sackville Drive. We just need a little bit more business thought process behind it. So go back to the drawing board, help your businesses achieve staying in the community, helping them grow, and they will build stuff that will look fantastic, but just let them have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, I'm sure you guys have all heard about it. It's transit, so starting with Cathy. Based on what you know about the Waverley, Fall River, Windsor Junction area, what are your plans for bringing public transportation to this area? How would you improve the current transit system in our riding?
So right now, we are not within the transit boundary. And that's one of the things that is coming up for review shortly. What we need to do is to be open to community consultation to find out what really is the need of the community. There are various bus routes that people are talking about. One is that there is a bus that comes through Dartmouth and ends at the overpass, and it doesn't come through Waverley, Fall River, Wellington at all. And then we have the airport bus at Perrin Drive that does not come down into Fall River, or taking your life in your hands if you're going to walk up to that bus, the airport bus. It's not the nicest walk to do, and so you need a car to get there. So we need to bring that transit bus down. Having the Wellington connector open is an opportunity as well to bring the bus along Highway 2 out to Wellington and then out the highway. There's also another opportunity I think that we have once the transit boundary review it comes up. And the example actually is in Muscodobit. When you talk about transit, Musco Rider is a beautiful cooperative program that supports a shuttle service, for lack of a better word. And so that's the other option or opportunity that I think that we can have in this district. Let's see where we can augment another transit-supported transit kind of program that would bring you to where Metro Transit is. So there's a couple of other options. And the other thing that we need to do is just be good neighbors. Right now we know that there's a lot of people that are housebound. And to get to medical appointments, to get to doctor's appointments, to get to the grocery, it's just a hardship. We have a lot of students that need to be able to get to university and to school. So let's make sure that the transit boundary review really looks at where is the need. We don't want Metro Transit up in our residential sections, but we do want it at a place where it's accessible for everybody to be able to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Thank you. This has been an emotional issue as well in my talks with the people in the different communities getting around. And my thoughts on public transit. Basic mobility is an essential service for people to work, to carry out their daily life, household tasks, and to contribute as a society. I know growing up, I used the bus all the time to get to school and do my things. And, I was coming from a household, my mother didn't drive. So if father wasn't around, we took the bus to get the groceries and everything else. So it is an essential service, and I don't think we can ignore that. And we can get that. Currently within HRM, we have the various things like the Integrated Mobility Plan, Rapid Transit Strategies, and the Moving Forward Together plans. These are all good. However, as Cathy's mentioned, we really need to revisit some of the logic that went into some of the drawings of the lines on the chart. The urban transportation boundary, in my opinion, and I think opinion of most, doesn't meet the demographic realities of our district. That needs to be looked at. And once we do that, then we can start looking at getting some scheduled transit in our region and it'll help people out better. It'll help our youth get to work. It'll help people get around. It'll help our aged people to get around. But this can be done. So as a councillor, my big point would be to work hard to work on that urban transportation boundary. So working within the rules and the different strategies, get us included with the rest of HRM, and get the transit routes up here. It can happen. It's easy to do. All we need is the will. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. This is an issue that has been ongoing for quite some time now, and my opponents are partly right. It is not a boundary service review relating to transit that is coming up. It is the regional plan that is coming up to be reevaluated. Back in 2005, when I was serving in the previous District 1, we passed the regional plan. It replaced the Vision 2020 plan, which was there at the beginning of the creation of HRM. And within that were boundaries that laid out service areas, whether it be water service areas, whether it be transit areas, whether it be boundaries for police, etc. So as your councillor, it is my intention, and by the way, I've brought this up on three separate occasions at debate at Regional Council, and every time it was put back on me that this is going nowhere because you're not within the transit boundary. So it is incumbent upon your member to force the issue when it's time to reopen the regional plan, which will take place this spring coming. Cathy's absolutely right. Facilities like Musco Rider and indeed Rotor Rider, which does serve the Fall River area, need to be built upon. The approval of ride sharing such as Uber is going to be a huge game changer for the suburban communities like Waverley, Fall River, etc. But my vision would see a proper Metro Transit bus come into the Waverley Fall River corridor and connect with the Port Wallace bus that comes out the Waverley Highway on the Dartmouth end, and indeed have the Metro X bus, which is not a normal transit bus, come down and have a proper bus stop to start serving the community in a larger way. So it is one of the foundations of my re-election platform, and one that I commit to fulfilling on behalf of the residents.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
Thanks, Pat. So transit is a huge issue for me. Going to door from all aspects of Muscadabid through Enfield all the way down the corridor to Fall River. I think the question actually forgot the whole corridor from Fall River out. They pay just as much tax as you guys. There's just as many people. If you go in those subdivisions, there's a lot of people. So talking to transit has been the biggest issue that I've come upon. My vision is to bring the Metrolink down to Grant Road, where the carpool parking lot is, and establishing a carpool parking lot. Now, letting that bus still do their express route back through the airport, and establishing a corridor bus that will hook up from that transit station to Fall River and beyond through Waverley. We can't forget half the district. From Enfield to Fall River is huge. There's a lot of people there. It doesn't have to go up in subdivisions, but with our little poll that we've asked, well over 3,000 people, 90% of people said they would use transit once every 2 weeks. We need transit. Since 2005, asked 3 times, this is a priority. I've heard it every single household. For their kids, for their seniors, people can't even get an accessibus without transit. They can't even book it. It's leaving people isolated. So, transit will be my top priority for the district. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You push and push. This is the top priority that everyone wants, and there's no need why District 1 can't get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, starting with Cathy. Other than increasing the tax base, what top 3 criteria will you use to decide whether you will support a proposed residential development?
So supporting a residential development right now, the top 3 things that I would look at would be, is it the right fit for the community? Is there the infrastructure there that is required? Does it fit within the visioning committee's work as well? Those are the top three things, really. And one of the issues we have such mistrust around developers and developing is that there's a lack of information. So the theme around what are the three priorities would also be making sure that the community is consulted, that they know what's happening, that there are open meetings, that there is a Q&A opportunity, that as your counselor, I will make sure that there's information in front of people so that they will understand what the development is and understand also what can be done and what cannot be done, understanding the positive impact of development as well as what could the negative impact would be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Art.
To get support for a planning proposal up through and to council, there's a few things that need to be in place. And Cathy's mentioned them, really. The vision plan has to be considered. But a big one is, of course, infrastructure. There's no point in putting a development in if there's no fire department nearby or schools or things like that. We have to take, the community has to develop as a community, not just an apartment building and then the rest will come. We need to think big picture and in the community. The other thing I would expect when proposals are coming forward, I'd like to see a bit more of the community benefits package from the developer, i.e. when a development comes forward for a large subdivision, what is the plan for sidewalks? What is the plans for parks? They need to be included as well, because we haven't seen those. As a counselor on the committee, I would want to see the full package. I wouldn't want to just see, well, I want to build a building over here. I want to see all the supporting studies in place before we take it to regional council. That would include water studies, wastewater studies. All the studies have to be in place and all the checks and balances in place. I don't want to take up a half-baked plan to council. We have to make sure we do our homework throughout all that. I think that's the big process that as a counselor, I can bring to you is making sure that all the checks and balances are in place to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. And first, I want to clarify, maybe Mr. Camperman misunderstood. I didn't mean since 2005 I only brought transit up 3 times. I didn't even represent Fall River in 2005. That's when the regional plan was introduced. This was in 3 transit route discussions since 16. As it relates to the developments, there are, as I mentioned earlier, 2 significant developments currently in the application stage here in the Fall River area. So we talked earlier about the vision plan, and of course, that strategy and the vision that folks had is important. And do not let it be lost on anyone that our staff does not look at all those components when evaluating any applications. The one I'll cite specifically down in Ingram, you'll maybe recall that one incarnation of that came forward a couple of years ago. It was looking for a path across the rail tracks, etc. That didn't happen because it didn't meet the MPS and the land use bylaws. So policy is very important, not only local policy, but HRM policy. We also have to look, as Art mentioned and others, at infrastructure. And I talked about the water system coming into the community. That is a huge impact on any potential future development. The traffic, any traffic studies, we know that our traffic system and our highways are beyond capacity now. So anything that's going to come in has got to be reflected. Not only that, our schools. I mean, if you start bringing in hundreds and hundreds of new homes, then you have to ask yourself, where are those children going to go to school? We also want to look at affordable housing components relating to some of these, and that has been a big factor for council over the last couple of months. Bonus density, which right now does not apply to suburban or rural communities, but it is one that I believe we should soon start to incorporate. But it is a comprehensive approach and one that requires not only consultation in the community, but indeed policy adoration. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
Thanks, Pat. I personally think it comes down to planning and the vision of the community and what everyone wants. And so coming back to planning, everyone's from BC all the way to Quebec. The developers have been made to put in playgrounds, parks, sewage, water, It's all in the plan. If the density is going to be too much, they're even made to build schools. It's all put on the developer. In the end price, of course, the residents will pay. But at least when they move into the subdivisions, it's done. It's not relying on the residents to fundraise and try to get a playground for the 100 kids that just moved in. So it comes down to planning. Putting more to-do checklists on developers is the logical thing to do. I've talked to a very smart lady. She was from BC, and she couldn't believe how far behind we were on putting stuff on developers. She couldn't believe that there were still gravel roads. She couldn't believe that there wasn't even a park cleared. It was just unfathomable for her to come into a residence in HRM in this world and not have any entities and her tax base be higher than what she was paying in BC. It's ridiculous. So let's start making the developers plan way more, or they will do it. You put it in the plan, they have no reason not to do it. They want to build, make them follow our rules. Make them follow our vision. We need places for residential areas to not to be a burden. Thank you.
Thank you. Time's up. All right, we're halfway done, folks. All right, starting off round 3 will be Steve Camperman. All right, and then it'll go Cathy, Art, and then Steve Streatch. Bear with me, some of these next few questions are actually long. I tried to shorten them, but to make them clear, I will probably have to read them all. All right. It is frequently said that District 1 needs the undivided attention of a committed full-time counselor. Are you willing to make a personal commitment that during your upcoming term as District 1 counselor, if you are elected, you would not hold another job and would reject any opportunity to run in a federal or provincial election?
The answer is yes. If I commit and am elected, I will be a full-time counselor. I personally think traveling this district and knowing and living in this district, it requires a full-time counselor, if not 2. It's a huge district. It's a huge population, lots of residences, and I can't see holding another job and doing this job properly. It's just, there's no way, even by the emails that we get just right now, and we're not even elected, I wouldn't even fathom of running another job. So the answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy?
Yes, I'll commit to being a full-time counselor for the entire 4 years. I actually have no aspirations for provincial or federal politics or party politics of any kind. The reason I am running municipally is because I believe in grassroots community work, and that's what a municipal councillor can do. I intend to resign as executive director of DASC and be a full-time councillor. We have a beautiful succession plan. DASC is well taken care of, surviving through COVID, and so yes, a full-time councillor is an exciting thing to think about and to do. Thank you.
Art?
Absolutely. I plan on being a full-time counselor for District 1. It's one thing I've learned the last few months campaigning, and as I research the different issues and dig into on different topics, there's no way you could do this properly part-time. So you will get my full and undivided attention as a full-time councilman. I have no ambition for higher levels of politics after this. I chose municipal politics because you can get things done here, municipal politics. I've never been part of any political party, mostly because I was in the Navy for 37 years. But I have no ambition beyond municipal politics. I think this is where it's at. This is where you can make the most difference to people. And people, yourselves, as the residents here in District 1, you deserve somebody who will give his full time to your needs and your concerns, and I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch?
Pat, I'm going to get you to reread that question.
Okay. It is frequently said that District 1 needs the undivided attention of a committed full-time counselor. Are you willing to make a personal commitment that, during your upcoming term as District 1 counselor, if elected, you would not hold another job and would reject any opportunity to run in a federal or provincial election?
Thank you for the clarity, because the first time you read it, I heard you say re-elected, and I had to believe that was pointed at me directly. Pat, this, and you've asked me this on many occasions, as have many other people. I am a full-time counselor. There is no way you could do this as a part-time job. When I was first elected back in 1999, the workload was not as heavy. There were 23 members of council, and the dynamics were different. Back when the boundary changes were made and council was reduced to 16 members, we introduced standing committees. The workload became enormous. And when I was elected here in Waverley, Fall River, Musquodobit Valley, it was only intensified. So absolutely, and I've said this clearly, and I'm not really sure where this is coming from, but there is only one election on right now, and that is the election we're discussing here tonight. There is no provincial election looming. My goodness, the governing party doesn't even have a leader, and there is no federal election that I am interested in. So my intentions are to run and to be re-elected, and to be, as I always have been, a full-time councillor here in District 1, and to represent the needs and the wants of the community to the best of my ability. I have no intention to run for another level of office. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question. Because District 1 is a large area, how do you plan to solicit feedback from your constituents and ensure they are kept well informed of all District 1 and HRM matters of interest? This involves engaging citizens, sharing what you have learned, and communicating what is happening at City Hall and its impact on District 1.
Thanks, Pat. I plan on traveling the district. I plan on holding town halls probably every year, hopefully in different parts of the district. I have to give credit to Cathy. She did a fabulous online town hall. I think in the days of COVID, those work very, very well. So yeah, we just have to think outside the box now. It's different times to get things out and online. So sending out newsletters, updating our residents, sending or even doing mini polls online to see what our residents want, questionnaires, what matters, things change. So definitely running a website, getting out door to door. I would do door to door, hopefully throughout the second term. Just you find out a lot face to face. People are willing to share a lot more than just on Facebook. It's nice to see, talk to people. Yeah, it takes time. It's a lot of effort, but you definitely find out what the concerns in the neighborhood are. So that would be my plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Steve, for the compliment. The town hall was a lot of fun. We had a great time. And so those are the things. I completely agree with what Steve had said about how we communicate within the district. So I will commit to an online monthly newsletter that talks about everything that has happened in the month at council that affects our district. There would be mailouts as authorized by HRM. I believe they're either 2 or 4 times a year, but I could be corrected. So the town halls. I also want to get out. Do you know how many community centers we have in District 1 and community facilities? So I want to get on their agendas. I want to make sure that I'm fully present, find out what's happening in all of our communities there that way. So attendance at local groups and association meetings. As a full-time counselor, of course, it's going to be incumbent to be very much aware of your social media, making sure that you use every opportunity that you have to communicate with our district residents. And it's really important to respond in a timely way. So my organizational skills, time management skills will be an advantage in terms of being able to respond during the campaign. I have been complimented about how timely we've been able to respond to residents and to be able to meet with people, and the fact that I want to be very proactive. It's very important that even before an issue is in the community, that we're out there and we're talking. I do like to cook, but I also love being able to be in the different restaurants within our district, and sometimes having a cup of tea, having a meal next to somebody in a local restaurant is an easy way and an efficient way to find out what's happening in community. Watching a good baseball game never hurts, and being at hockey games and being fully present in the community, that's exactly what I want to do. So I will be very familiar to everyone, absolutely. So thank you, and I look forward to being fully present as your councillor.
Thank you. Art.
Thank you. What I have learned over the years is communication and transparency are essential to success. One thing I've found, and you've heard it now about town halls, I've utilized the concept of town halls very successfully over the years. I find if you communicate to the people that you are responsible for and you share the issues with them and make them part of the solution space as well. Because the lack of communication or the lack of information from people, human nature is what it is. People will fill the void, and they'll fill the void with what they want to think. So it's incumbent on the councillor to make sure people know what's going on and answer their questions and listen to them. My plan would be to continue on the tradition or the venues of town halls, the frequency to be determined by the communities. They'll have to be dispersed because of our large area, but I can accommodate that as well. One thing I learned also, social media, websites do wonders. I would set up a community sites and make sure they're all in place for people to go to. And certainly out in the Musquodobit Valley with a new high-speed internet, they can go to my website and have a look at stuff. But anyway, that's my vision for the communication, but it's absolutely essential. So it'll be town halls, websites, social media. The information will be out there, and I'll make you part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. You know, I'm running on my record this election. I have never had a problem with communicating with the people I represent or those that have issues. I answer my own phone. I carry 2 separate cell phones and 2 landlines. I answer all my own emails. I don't have staff do it for me. And up until January, Pat, your Laker newspaper was one of my main avenues to get the message out, and you did an effective job. Cathy's absolutely right. We now have the ability at HRM, and there's only a certain budget that councillors have to get that message out. But now we do have quarterly newsletters that are provided outside of that budget. We use the Eastern Shore Cooperator, the Musquodobit Valley Bulletin, and indeed now the online Laker. I have always had a high profile, which I believe bodes well for the residents here in the area that I represent. I have had no trouble getting issues that are important to the people that I represent on the local media, whether that be a newspaper or television. So I'll continue in that fashion. COVID has definitely forced a new reality, and it has emphasized social media and the ability and indeed the necessity to get the message out electronically. I have slowly but surely made my way through Facebook and Twitter now, and indeed onto Instagram. So it is my intention to continue with an online presence that is significant, and community meetings are have never been an issue that I have shied away from, nor will they be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is about trails, starting with Steve Camperman. While there are many beautiful trails in Waverley and Fall River, they are only accessible to Lakeview, Windsor Junction, and Beaverbank residents by car. The recent shutdowns of our parks highlighted the need for safe local trails. We have an opportunity to tie into the Sackville Lakes trail system using the old tracks along Wingate Drive. What will you do to ensure the safe trails or sidewalks are accessible in these areas? Please provide a timeline.
So, Pat, I walk trails every day in Oakfield, Grand Lake, Oakfield, Laurie Park, and I know they're essential to communities. Dog lovers, people that run, the Windsor Junction connector with the old railroad, that would be a fantastic avenue to work towards and help the community achieve trying to connect it to the Sackville trails. Pushing it a little bit further, if we could actually connect all the communities with the Aerotech connector coming through, there's also a trail that's supposed to run from Enfield all the way through to Fall River. So that would be fantastic if we could actually get a whole multi-use trail that we could go from one side of the district to the other. So I would definitely help as much as I can. I would also like the multi-use trails, which I've been pitching to all the residents that I've kind of gone door to door. What else could we use our trails for? With COVID, we need to do more in the wintertime. We got to light up our trails, partner with community groups. Let's make those trails accessible after dark, after 5 p.m., so people can still go snowshoeing, skiing, or whatever they want to do. Our trails, there's also trails at golf courses. Some golf courses teamed up with Nordic ski teams. So to get that message out, we need a counselor to broadcast it. So for the Sackville Trail, I hear it's beautiful. I haven't walked it, but to be able to walk along that old railway, along the lake, would be absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. Before I lived in Fall River, I actually lived in Sackville. And so the Sackville Trails was a favorite spot for me to walk and to hike. There is an issue around the Sackville Lakes Trail in that the rail line still belongs, I believe, to the Hansport line. And so maybe our incumbent would know this better than I do at this point, but it's an American company. So there is an issue there around being able to acquire access in that way. COVID has shone such a light on our need for the safe enjoyment of the outdoors and the trail system. So when we put our campaign team together, I actually went to the SWEPS group and I had 2 past chairs of the SWEPS group come and sit on our campaign team so that we can understand and learn really about what is the connectivity, what is the issue that is happening around, and what's the plan. And if you look at the integrated mobility plan that the HRM has, so that there is a section. The question asks for a timeline, and I don't believe that there's a timeline given, but there is a phased-in process that is documented there. And when we look at, and SWEPS, for people who might not know, it is the Shubenacadie Watershed Environmental Protection Society. They've worked with the trail system in Nova Scotia. They were going to be a partner, and so, but I know that there's some kind of an association there. And so the Shubenacadie, the SWEPS group, is working really hard to make sure that our trails are connected, and we need to ensure that in the green plan and in the integrated mobility plan that we get to actually make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Trails. I love trails. We get out to them quite often. I think when I say we, I mean me and my little Jack Russell. We love to check out the different trails in the district, and I'm sure many of you have seen me with my Jack Russell as we go out, and certainly in the Musquodobit Valley, each weekend we try to get a different trail under our belt, while my wife enjoys one of the many vendors out there. I would support, of course, any expansion of trails within within whatever timelines can be established. Certainly to answer part of the question there, we were asked what sort of timeline could I offer. I'm afraid I can't offer a timeline because I don't really know enough about the process of establishing one of these things and what the regulatory process is through council. I'd have to learn more, and I will learn more. So I can't offer you a finite time, but what I can offer you is that I will support the expansion and of our trails because I think it's a great asset for our community and for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thanks very much, Pat, and all good answers. from my competitors. Steve Kamperman said someone needs to broadcast this. Well, I'm going to broadcast a very big win that we have here in our area relating to trails. And Cathy mentioned SWEP's great organization and has several local organizations working within its boundaries. I have, for many years, supported trails, and indeed HRM is a significant funder of trails throughout the municipality. The Mastodon Trail, Art, I'm sure out in Carroll's Corner, you've walked a great trail, and we were significant partners in constructing that. The one that I want to broadcast tonight is one that is going to have the grand opening of a new bridge connecting, and sometimes we forget that there's a significant portion of Dartmouth within our district here as well, and I want to give a big shout out to all the residents in Port Wallace direction and the Dartmouth end of our district. This bridge that I went out to visit with Alan Billard and Bob Guscott a couple of weeks ago is a $700,000 installation. And it is an example of working with all three levels of government and indeed a private company to construct. It's in place now, it goes over the tracks, and it will connect Shuby Park not only with Waverley, but indeed through Fall River, into Oakfield, into Enfield. And my understanding is that the local groups are looking for the mandate to govern whether this is a shared use trail or completely non-motorized. But that's a decision that they have to make. The municipality in this case is an enabler. We do not go into the communities and plan trails. We take input from local organizations that know the communities, know the desires, know the needs best. We mentioned old rail cuts. The Musquodobit Trailway that I worked on coming up from the Eastern Shore was one of the first. They used an old rail cut, but when it got to the Musquodobit Valley, there was no appetite, and they turned that down. So it's about individual needs of the community.
Time up.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
All right, the next question regards Wingate Village development. While it is in the adjacent riding or district of Beaverbank, residents in Capilano would like to know where the local candidates stand on a road connecting that development to Capilano Estates. So the question is, what is the candidate's stance on having a road from that development going into Capilano via Elise Victoria Drive, thus creating more traffic on a residential street in our riding? And Steve Camperman starts first.
Thanks, Pat. I have to be honest, I'm not too aware of that development, but I would have to educate myself and, read up on it and probably do a lot of door knocking and on both sides of the community and both sides of the borders to see what everyone feels, and then make my decision or go to council and go from there. But honestly, I can't answer that without educating myself. Thank you.
Thanks. Cathy.
Rephrase, give us a question again, please, Pat.
Okay. The question is about the Wingate Village development. While it is in the adjacent riding of district of Beaverbank, residents would like to know where our local candidates stand on a road connecting that development to Capilano Estates. The question is, what is the candidate's stance on having a road from that development going into Capilano via Elise Victoria Drive, thus creating more traffic on a residential street in our district?
Thank you. So I'm on record. I've been up at Elise Victoria. I've met with the residents in up there as well, and it's a beautiful cul-de-sac. I mean, there are acre and a half or more, acre plus lots and beautiful homes, and a cut through to support a Beaverbank development in another district doesn't make sense at all. I actually met with Councillor Lisa Blackburn to understand the position that she had, because she's actually been advocating well with the developer and our district residents, to be honest, around making sure people are aware of what is happening and what the options are as well. And I've also met with some residents as well at the other end around Bryancrest, because there's also a concern around a cut through at Bryancrest to accommodate this development in another district. there are a lot of issues here. And I ran 4 years ago, some of you may remember, and I did go to the developers meeting that was held in Beaverbank. And since then, there's been some more changes. So the three big issues around that are for our Capilano residents is that there's smaller lots and there's a higher density. They're worried about the traffic, and they're also worried about waste treatment facilities and what that might mean for their community. So I think that's it, Pat.
All right, that sounds good. All right, Art.
That particular development I'm aware of, and I've dug into it a little bit and researched it as part of my learning process to run for this job. I don't know all the variables and all the connections in it. As far as that cut line going through there, though, I have given that some thought, and I have gone up there and looked myself. Didn't quite talk to as many people as I would have liked that day that I went up there, but still, it is a beautiful area. I think we can do better. I think we need to sit back and look at the different options. Interconnectivity between the districts and all of HRM is important. I get that. But I think what we need to do, the onus was on us and me as a councillor to push the thought process. There's always a better way of doing something. Perhaps we can accommodate all parties there with a different consensus view. So that's where I go. So initially, I wouldn't support as is, but I will be honest, I will have to look at it when we do further consultation and we learn more about the connectivity, perhaps we can come up with a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. And I'm very familiar with the application that is currently coming forward. And I as well have, and I sit on the Northwest Community Council with Deputy Mayor Lisa Blackburn. We've talked about this on several occasions. And members of council, and indeed potential members of council, have to be very careful when it comes to a quasi-judicial situation like a public hearing. If you are found or seen to be biased or have a predisposed disposition, then the developer's lawyer can have you removed. So what I'm hearing you ask, though, is not whether I support the development, but indeed whether I would support an amendment to allow the road to come into Capilano. And I think that's the thrust of your question. And if that is the thrust of your question, the absolute answer is no, I do not. It is not incumbent upon us here in Fall River to make Beaverbank's solution our problem. I have spoken to many people in that subdivision, and I think it would be wrong-minded for us to bring traffic from a development in an adjacent community, an adjacent district, into that subdivision. So when this comes to Community Council, which my understanding is will be either late this fall or early in the spring, then we're going to be looking for solutions that do not impede or impinge on the residents here in Fall River.
Thank you. All right, we're on to round 4, the last round, folks. So, all right, starting with Steve Streatch for this question. What is your vision for District 1, specifically addressing quality of life, infrastructure, recreation needs, and transit? What are your 2 highest priorities for change given the growth of the community versus the challenges that the lack of infrastructure presents?
Pat, that's a pretty long question, and I won't get you to repeat it because it's all-encompassing, isn't it? So I think you're asking, what is my vision? My vision is to make this district one of the best that we can. I mentioned earlier that physical size is 2,500 square kilometers. That is huge. We have subdivisions in the very urban end of Dartmouth, right through the suburban growing communities of Waverley, Fall River, into the agricultural belt. Indeed, the only agricultural belt deemed under the Green Plan in HRM in the Musquodobit Valley. So I am looking at infrastructure projects that bring us together, that close the gap, that offer greater connectivity, whether that be transit. We talked earlier about bringing Metro Transit into this community, whether it be opportunities such as ride-sharing, Uber specifically, or Lyft, which not only will provide options for residents, but indeed employment opportunities, or whether it is recreation and the completion of the fiber optic network in the Muscadabid Valley. We have the best of all worlds. And we have to remember that inasmuch as the buying power is here in this end of the district, Waverley Fall River, the resource part of the Musquodobit Valley is what indeed we're buying. So whether it be agricultural, whether it be gold, whether it be any of the primary industries, we have the best of all worlds, and I believe that we have to recognize that and work closer together as a cohesive district. When this district was created in 2016, a lot of folks, myself included, said, how can you put all of those areas together in one district? Well, it's not been easy, folks, and I cannot be everything to everybody all the time. But I am trying my level best, and I believe that we are moving forward. I want to continue to engage the residents in all of our communities to work together and to support one another, whether it be in business, whether it be socially, or buy local. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
Pat, I will get you to repeat that long question.
I figured someone would because it is long. But all right, what is your vision for District 1, specifically addressing quality of life, infrastructure, recreation needs, and transit? What are your two highest priorities for change given the growth of the community versus the challenges that the lack of infrastructure presents?
So the biggest challenges that I want to solve with the infrastructure problem would be to implement transit, to bring a corridor transit bus. We all know it's not going to go up subdivisions, but to bring it to the end of every subdivision so all the seniors, young people can get to work throughout the district is a huge factor. The infrastructure is definitely lagging. Just not in transit. On our recreational side, there's very small community parks. They're buried deep into subdivisions. A great example is right on the number 2 highway. We have a great little green space sitting across from Sobeys that has been sitting there since the previous councillor, Barry Dalrymple. That's like the heart of Fall River. It would be beautiful to have a park where small little entrepreneurs can come out, test their businesses with either canoeing, kayaking, help with the community, and be the pride of Fall River. Fall River's the heart. Like Steve said, out of Muscadabid, that is the resource place. It supports Fall River, but we also have to let Fall River people go out to Musquodobit. So the infrastructure we need to support out there. We need to start bringing the tourism and a bus route or a transit, maybe just on the weekends, just to support it. But that's what I would like to see. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. It's an interesting question because I find part of the answer is actually in the question itself. How do you attain quality of life? So quality of life comes when you're accessible, when there is transit to get you where you need to go to be able to live, work, and play in this beautiful district that we have. Quality of life is when our youth, our seniors, people of all ages have places where they can have the safe enjoyment of their community, where there are recreation facilities, where the outdoor trails support us, where we feel safe on our roads. So the infrastructure and the planned growth, how we do that in a way that it fits within the communities that we have. 47 distinct communities. One of the things that the vision, when we're talking about a vision you would have for the district, is that we've got 47 communities that are respected, that are distinctive, but somehow there was a plan and a way that we can bring them all together to say, here's where we are all similar, here's where we can be collaborative, here's where we can celebrate each other. And so that vision of bringing District 1 together in a very healthy way so that we're not competitive, but we are collaborative is going to be an interesting thing for me. 2 priorities for change. One is that we do need a boundary review. It is true that people in Dartmouth were not satisfied with the past boundary review, and they would like to be back in the city of Dartmouth. So when we do that boundary review the next time we look at it, I do think that we have to figure out what is the goalpost. where is the district going to be the most synergetic. And so bringing together all of those issues will give us a quality of life. And quality of life starts with the individual and with the neighbor, with how we support local, how we engage in our communities, and how we share our resources, how we take care of our environment. Quality of life is all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Quality of life. Quality of life is very important. It's an issue that I've dealt with for many years in different forums, how to improve people's quality of life. And it's all measured by a different yardstick. But I think basically we can all agree that we can make improvements on our quality of life. We've mentioned it at length here earlier about public transit, and that'll certainly improve quality of life, getting people out and getting people around. Other things we can do, such as the community-based supports and services for both our aged population and for our youth. We need to look at all that sort of stuff. We need to develop opportunities for the youth, because remember, they're the ones coming up behind us. We have to look after them. Opportunities for our youth to develop and grow within their own community, and however that looks. There's a number of ways of doing that as well. Community centers, different youth clubs. Not everything revolves around the baseball team. Sorry, Steve, but there are other things that people can do. Juniors Achievers, different types of activities that are great for developing our youth. So my priority for the quality of life coming forward would be public transit. I'm on record as stating that. But secondly is our community support and services for both our aging population and for our youth. And by doing those things, the rest will come. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to our 14th question. What is each candidate's plan for allotting police resources to our area to help with issues such as speeding and reckless driving behavior, and how does each candidate feel they can address this given the current anti-police climate which threatens law enforcement resources? Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. This has definitely been a discussion that has been raised to a pretty high level, not only here in our community, our province, but internationally. There is a movement referred to as defund the police. I don't know what that means. The Police Commission has engaged a consultant to try and help them come up with a term. I do not believe that we should be cutting back on resources for law enforcement. Indeed, what I hear people say is they want greater resources. If there is one or two issues that rise to the top for me regularly, it is the lack of patrols throughout the district by our police services. You have to remember as well, at the time of amalgamation, I referenced the service agreement. HRM engaged with regional police and the RCMP, and we are the only jurisdiction in Canada that has the partners in policing formula. Indeed, where regional police patrols certain areas, RCMP patrols other areas. Council about 2 months ago, and you have to remember as well that the business of council has not stopped since the pandemic. We have met regularly. We have accomplished many things. One of the accomplishments that we approved a couple of months ago was to implement a policing study where we would look at resources, we would look at financing, we would look at jurisdiction. Are the police being overtasked in certain areas? Are they being undertasked in other areas? Indeed, is there an appetite to maybe change the model here in the more suburban communities, that being Waverley, Fall River, to more mirror Bedford, where those communities are patrolled by regional police instead of RCMP? So all of those things are going to be a part of this study. It is an all-encompassing, comprehensive study, and the results are due back sometime in the new year. So it is one that is very important to me, and indeed.
Time's up. Steve Camperman.
Thanks, Pat. I grew up with a first responder household, so it's a very difficult question to comment on. But going door to door, RCMP, with Musquodobit, Lower Sackville, and Enfield responding to different districts and not being able to talk to each other is very difficult. A few years ago, right around amalgamation, the fire service decided to, they redid their comm system, and whoever's closest goes. It makes sense. Let's bring common sense back into policing. I know district boundaries, people are funded by different ways, and people get angry if people cross different boundaries. But when it comes to life or death or very concerning issues, it should be the closest. As in fire, there's mutual aid agreements. It's all about having the discussion. Speeding is a huge issue. Every single person in the community wants speed calming or speed bumps or whatever to slow people down, because we hear stunting. We hear about stunting every single day on the 118 or the 111. So, when I grew up in Waverley, radar ray was feared. So it does come down with enforcement. No one sped. If there's enforcement, we all know it's there. It helps. But in saying that, their resources are taxed. So we have to bring in speed radar, photo radar. It will help. It's helped in other jurisdictions. It's not a tax grab. It solves the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. So in terms of policing in our district, specifically, we work with 4 RCMP detachments. There's the Sackville Detachment, Enfield, Muscadabid, and Halifax City Police. I guess that would be the 4. And so one of the things that we have to figure out is, when the snow center was built, we had actually a police officer in the snow center. We did have an office there, and it's not there anymore. So it'd be interesting. The police presence got diverted someplace else. So I would want to understand and work to figure out how do we bring that back. We would like to see more of that happening. A bigger police presence is an important thing. I do give absolute credit to the article and to Councillor Streatch working with the Waverley Community Association for the speed radar signs that are coming up, and there will be 3, a long-awaited and very happily received by the community, absolutely. When we talk about defunding the police, it's actually got some American roots in a culture where surplus military equipment was given to the police. And then when the tragedy in Minneapolis happened, the defund the police became a more international comment. And we understand that we all come in this room from a place of privilege. And so respecting the Black Lives Matter is a very important thing when we think about what is policing and where does it go. Right now, what we need to do is figure out how do we resource our police force so that they don't have to do mental health services, that they are trained and that they're specialized, and so that the right information is in front of our police officers, that they can do their job safely, and that they can also take care of us as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting and emotive issue. I know defunding the police has grown in definition and understanding across the world from where it first started. To me, and what defund the police means to me, means going away and rationalizing what our expectations are of our police service. And that is for us to decide. And I think we need to do that. I don't think we need to cut budgets right now. I think it would be foolhardy to do so until such time that we decide what we want our police to do and not do. If in future times we find that a review finds that certain things like mental health response units, etc., are better done by other people, then the funds can be looked at for reallocation at that time. As far as an increased police presence within our district right now, great idea. However, I don't think it's going to hit. I think it's going to hit a financial wall. Where's the money coming from for this? It's not going to happen. What we need to do is reach out with our community partners. There's a lot of people out there with some great ideas. We need to incorporate that and start looking at things like community-based policing. I'm not talking about your mother or your father carrying a sidearm. That's not what I mean. Community-based policing could be things like traffic monitoring, etc. bringing in technology, using technology, much as mentioned, like the radar guns, etc., like that. That we can do, and we can do those better. So I think that those efforts would improve the safety in our district as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question. One resident wrote to us saying, while they love living in Fall River for the past 4 years, it really hurts when you have to go to Enfield or Sackville for any recreational or community facilities. If you were elected, what are your importance to get a rink, temporary dome, baseball or football fields, like a turf field for the football, tennis court, libraries, etc.? There is a lot of population, but not a lot of funding for this. How are you going to change that? Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat. And once again, you left the all-encompassing questions to the end. There's a lot of things in that question, and to disseminate it a bit, there is one project that I have been very supportive of and continue to be here in this district, and that is the creation and installation of an artificial sports field. I've been working with a local group over the last number of months, took a petition to council, and now have it on recreation staff's radar. There is an outdoor facilities master plan that is being created. Fall River will be on that list, as will another community that we will have to compete against. So it is going to be vital that your member is prepared and indeed able to convince the majority of council to come this way and not necessarily in a westerly direction. As it relates to recreation, I know you talked specifically about Fall River, but this is a big district. We're looking at recreation opportunities in the Musquodobit Valley as well, and I'm very proud that we had a new facility, including a splash pad, approved for Middle Musquodobit, and I'll continue to expand upon that. You have to remember as well that HRM does not look at communities individually. They look at things more on a regional basis. So whether it be the snow center, whether it be an artificial field, indeed, whether it be a rink, which I think would be some years down the road for this community because they're regional in context, you have to look at the bigger picture. There are rinks, albeit maybe not enough ice space in a lot of people's opinion, especially with Shearwater closing down here a while ago to residents. But all of those conversations have to be part of a bigger picture. But specifically, splash pad and playground in Middle Musquodobit and artificial turf field here in Fall River are top priorities for me.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
I'm an avid sportsman. I love my sports. So I agree with Steve. A multi-use field would be fantastic. The only problem that they're kind of running into is it's a P3 model school. So it's a very hard place to put a multi-use turf field there. So if that's going to take a long time, why don't we start thinking out of the box a little bit more? We have other sports fields around the area where we can start to, make multi-use fields. We need it now. We also need the trail system to connect Sackville from Enfield to Wellington. I would also like to see, we have plenty of lakes. We haven't even talked about lakes. Access to lakes, kayaking, canoeing. There's only one boat launch on Grand Lake. There's none on Lake Fletcher, unless you know private people. It's a whole Shubenacadie Canal system that we can definitely take and explore. So we need to start creating those public access to our lakes, our parks, making them bigger. In Muscadabit, I really think they need to find their niche. Trail systems, camping, wilderness, whatever it is for recreation will bring the city folk. We just need to start supporting it. Day trips down there would be fantastic. The leaves changing, the agricultural, the exhibition, it's all tied into recreation. So if we start broadcasting what we want, we will start to set goals and achieve it. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Cathy.
Pat, would you do the question again, please?
Yes, I will. One resident wrote saying, while they love living in Fall River for the past 4 years, it really hurts when you have to go to Enfield or Sackville for any recreational or community facilities. If you were elected, what are your importance to get a rink, temporary dome, baseball or football field like a turf field, tennis court, libraries, etc.? There is a lot of population, but not a lot of funding for this. How are you going to change that?
Thank you very much. I have actually met with some of the key principal persons with the Fall River Turf Field as well. One of the things that, we are going to be in competition with another region in order to get that to come to fruition. So that's probably one of my strengths is around mobilizing a community and making sure that we are heard loud and clear. We had the experience when we wanted to get the land for Dask and filled City Hall to capacity in everybody's email boxes in terms of council. So making an informed, loud, beautiful noise about why this field is going to be exceptional for our district and why we really need it. I think the other thing that can happen is that having experience with a capital campaign and a few capital campaigns, the answer is not always residing with government. So it is all three levels of government coming together with community, with corporations, with foundations. So that's actually how we get those things. That's how we get good projects done. I look really forward to working throughout the district on what people need to have. One of the things that we looked at in terms of libraries is, I grew up in the days when we had the mobile bookmobile, and the bookmobile came around and we loved it. So we have a beautiful, beautiful library in downtown Halifax, but I'd like to see the rural community be more supported in terms of our libraries, and we do have some really good libraries there as well. The issue of our schools and how we get to use them better and being able to use our community facilities in a year-round focus as opposed to just a 1 or 2 season option is something that we could really work together on as well. It is true that we don't have a rink, and our youth, they have to go and leave our community in order to be able to exercise and do the kinds of sports that they want. Even seniors who are talking about pickleball, they need a place.
Time's up. Art.
Okay, thank you for the question. I know certainly, if I might start with, in my immediate family, we look quite forward to the Fall River Turf coming up. My grandson plays with the Fall River Dragons, and we look forward to using that field. And certainly, those kids are quite excited about it as well. I hope we can get that through. I believe throughout the district, we need to look at different community services and infrastructure. It's not all necessarily a sports rink or a tennis court, but it could be. And what needs to be done is the community needs to get together and what do you really want? And the community, as I mentioned before, about visions and being realistic when you approach it. Part of the council person's job will be to sit with those committees and talk about their desires, what they would like to see. I want to have an Olympic swimming pool. Well, perhaps the councilman can support that, but the financial reality will say, no, that's probably not going to happen. And we can and that's how all the levels can work together. The communities are very important. Your council representative is very important, and the different levels of government are very important, as Cathy mentioned, for funding. It is in my community's platform that we need to develop some of the infrastructure, and how that looks and how that is shaped up in the time ahead is yet to be determined, but I would look forward to working with everybody to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to the last question of the night. After this, we will have closing remarks from you guys, and I will also do a wrap-up. That wasn't, no one actually knew that I was going to do that, but now they do. All right. What are your plans to practice restraint on budgets, as we have a long dark hole to dig ourselves out of? Now is not the time to campaign on spending. Are you willing to look at cuts and overspending? And we start with Steve Streatch.
Thank you, Pat, and absolutely. You know, I mentioned at the onset where HRM found ourselves relating to the COVID and the pandemic and the financial constraints we were in. We made significant cuts, folks, in order to get to the other side. And indeed, as Cathy mentioned earlier, we are required by law to bring balanced budgets in. We are not allowed to run deficits. I was very encouraged when the federal government came up with a plan to offer a line of credit to municipalities, Halifax being one, of over $100 million. We will take advantage of that at a very low interest rate, and it will be used to cover some of our core mandate responsibilities. But it is time to tighten the belt, folks. I mentioned earlier that we had to make some tough decisions as it related to timing for snow clearing, as it related to green bends, as it related to delays of projects. We talked about police earlier. People wonder why the police aren't necessarily in the communities. It's because the community police initiative has been canceled, as has the traffic division. So there is a give and a take. You cannot push and pull at the same time. If we have to make the cuts we know we all do have to make, then there is going to have to be a sacrifice in the levels of service or indeed in expenditures. CAO Jacques Dubé was on the hot seat a while ago for a employee that had a real sweetheart deal outside of council's knowledge. That has to stop. Any spending that is going to be done has got to meet certain criteria, and I can tell you that as soon as this election is over, Council is going to hit the ground running, and that's why I mentioned earlier that experience is going to be so important. We will begin budget debates likely the end of November, early December, that will take us into a very, very important time coming up in the next few years.
Thank you. Steve Camperman.
You just read that question quickly.
All right.
Thanks.
What are your plans to practice restraint on budgets as we have a long dark hole to dig ourselves out of? Now is not the time to campaign on spending. Are you willing to look at cuts in overspending?
I totally agree that we should be status quo right now. We all like to dream. We all want everything. But Lake Council had to find $80 million. We need to be able to cut, either it be biweekly garbage service or maybe put off those dreams of, a little bit of infrastructure projects, or maybe just have the bus run just down to Fall River for now and back up. But, and have the plan for later on when fiscally we can do it. It's going to be tough. Like, we all want more. We all think we pay too much taxes, but we all, like Steve said, we have to tighten the belt. So as a business, you have your ups and downs. You have your years of good. You have your horrible years, but you save, you plan. So when you're having a bad year, you start planning for the good years. So I would definitely tighten the belt and do some budget constraints. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. Talks about, yes, so HRM can't operate at a deficit. And so, yes, cuts were made in order to have that balanced budget. One of the things that we have to look at when we make cuts is what is the impact of those cuts? What services, what programs, and in our district specifically, it would be really good for our residents to be able to understand what is the impact for them right now. And so as a good communicator, that's one of the things that will happen for me as your counselor, is that you'll understand what is the impacts of those decisions. And at the other side of it, I had spoken about earlier a little bit, was where HRM does spend money and where do we invest it? And how do we invest it in a way and in such a way that it will stimulate the economy? So that's the other side of restraint, is actually how do we stimulate economy during a time when we do have to have a balanced budget. The lessons that can be learned from other municipalities and how they have survived through COVID and how they're thriving. The Association of Municipalities has been doing some significant work. All three levels of government have been working together to figure out how do we support municipal units so that programs and services that are essential are saved from the scissors, I guess, the cut, for lack of a better word. But we have to figure out how, as a municipality, what gap do we fill and what gap is going to be provided by the province and by our federal government. So only by working all three levels of government together are we going to be able to ensure that we have the right programs and services available to us that our tax dollars are paying for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Budgets. I've worked with budgets a great deal over the years. Found myself responsible for numerous projects and operations that often exceeded multi-million-dollar limits. And I was responsible for those and making sure they balanced and came in on time. It's hard work, and you should expect that your representative is going to work hard on these budgets as well. I agree, we can't operate deficit, nor should we. You don't like you're not expected to operate on a deficit. You're expected to balance your checkbook. You should expect your city to do the same thing. And that's what they do, all right? There's different ways to do budgeting. We are in dark times right now. We have to get out and we have to get back on our feet economically. I get that, and I think everybody gets that. There may be cuts, or there certainly won't be any growth for a couple of years anyway, I suspect. That said, we can do this properly and approach it. We don't need to approach this thing piecemeal, all right? There's different ways of doing budgeting. And I think as a council, we need to look at that. Perhaps not in the next couple of years, because it really is going to be hard in the next couple of years just to get back on our feet. But there's different approaches to budgeting where the community interests and values and desires can be brought into the budget early, and we can develop what's called business plans, and budgets will support business plans. And we can do this through different priority-based planning, budget planning processes, or value-based budget process, but these can be done. And that's, as your councillor, I would advocate for and work very hard towards. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now is time for the closing remarks, and we begin with Art. I know, right?
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say thanks, Pat. Thanks to you and your team putting this together for us tonight. It's been fantastic. Makes our brain matter work and turn things around, and that's very important. I think the questions have been fantastic. I think what it does indicate to me is that we have an engaged community, that they're asking the right questions, and you deserve the right answers. One thing you've probably seen tonight is that your representative has to have a broad knowledge of a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of work there, and you should be able to expect that your candidate is going to do the hard work, do his homework, do their homework, and get the job done properly. Your expectations is of your representative that he is going to represent you at the various committees on and council from an informed and educated point of view, and that's well informed. Secondly, an important trait, and it's come out a couple times, is emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is crucial in a councillor. What I mean by emotional maturity is knowing what your own personal biases are so you can put them away when you go into council or you go into committees. Steve made a good point about that. If you don't, you're going to get yourself into trouble. But knowing what your personal biases are signifies emotional maturity. Also, emotional maturity, and certainly with this job, would come the need for a pretty thick skin, I would think. All right, and emotional maturity, you have that thick skin, but it means you can still listen to other people. You can listen to dissenting votes or dissenting views and still be reasonable about the whole process. That's part of the emotional maturity you expect. Throughout all this, I think, I hope I've left with you with an impression that I had that experience. I have those characteristics and values, and I would love to be your next representative on council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Steve Camperman.
I just also wanted to thank you, Pat, and the volunteers and FRABA for hosting this great event. It's my first time taking place in something like this. It's been fantastic. I just want the residents to know that we talked about a full-time counselor, not running a side business or just being there for the people. So I will be a full-time counselor. I will be holding town halls. I'm just not saying it now. I will be in your community. You will see me at events. I enjoy that. I enjoy listening. I enjoy problem solving. We need someone that thinks outside the box, not always in a straight line. It doesn't always work. In business, that's what it's about, to bringing people together, to listening to people. If that person has a better idea than you, then you accept it. That's what I've learned. Don't be afraid to accept other people's views or values. It makes life so much easier. It helps when you surround yourself with great people, teaming up with people. I'm a proven leader in the business community. I was on the board of council for Husqvarna across Canada and North America. We did great things. World CEOs came. They tried to figure out how we excelled in such a small market of Nova Scotia to being the number 2. We had great ideas. We thought outside the box. That's what someone needs to change things up in this district. People want someone to listen. Someone wants a councillor to go to their door, like Cathy said, sit down with them and show that they care. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy.
Thank you, Pat. So I also share my thanks and appreciation to you, the Laker News, and to FRABA for putting on this event. I can be your trusted voice for uncertain times. As a community, we're adapting to the reality of life with COVID, and our municipal government is being tasked with making vital decisions that are going to ensure not only the health and safety of our citizens, but of our economy. I'm very committed to, and I have demonstrated success in balancing physical responsibility with the varied needs of the people that we need to serve in our district. I will be open and timely in our communication, and I'll be very transparent. I'll tell you what I know and what I don't know. Make sure that we have the information to make the best decisions possible, and sometimes it might not be the answer that we want. I will bring focus to residential and business services in District 1. I have a proven track record with the Greater Burnside Business Association on their board, with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association as well. I will advocate for improved access to public transportation, to our transit services, to water. I'll work with all 3 levels of government. We'll look around and work around the environmental sustainability in our district. We'll talk about safer transportation routes, keeping volunteerism alive in District 1. Celebrating volunteers in the nonprofit sector and bringing them together is a passion of mine. Building community and capacity in community is something that I have a lived experience with for over 40 years. I would love to be your counselor. October 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Streatch.
Well, thanks very much, Pat, and like everyone else has said, not only to you, but to FRABA for hosting this event tonight. And thanks for the folks tuning in live on this broadcast. I also want to tell you, I talked about how privileged I was to how privileged I felt to feel the warmth and the support of the people around the district over the last 4 years, and how proud I've been to represent this district. I also want to tell you that it's very humbling to be in the presence of my competitors here this evening, and I think I've learned something from all of you, and I have a great level of respect for all 3 of you. 2020 has definitely been a year like no other. You know, COVID-19 has forced a new reality upon us and created many challenges, not only for us as residents, but indeed for Halifax Regional Council. There's been much said tonight about community engagement and how important it is to communicate, how important it is to talk to the many of our 47 communities, as Cathy has indicated. But understand this, folks, the real business of Regional Council happens at City Hall. I have been a member of Regional Council since 1999, taking a brief hiatus in 2012 with health concerns, and back now with a passion. I went there as one of the youngest members on Council, and now I am well respected and looked upon as one of the senior members around that Council chamber. The decisions before us and the course we take over the next few years will be critical. This is a time for experience, as I mentioned earlier. I offer that experience. The legacy knowledge I have gained, the business background, my government skills have bode well for HRM and our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, I know how government works, and I know how to get results. With a solid track record, a proven ability, and indeed, I offer leadership, stability, and continuity to the residents here in District 1. I honestly ask for your support.
Time's up. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this broadcast. I want to thank FRABA for coming on and partnering with me. It's been a lot of work, let's just say. Thank each candidate for putting their name forward. Municipal politics impacts all of us. they make the decisions that affect all of us. So I want to, for each one in our district, District 1, Waverley, Fall River, Musquodobit Valley, I want you to vote. October 6th to 14th, you can vote. Why am I crying? I don't know. October 6th to 14th, you can vote for the phone and online electronic. October 10th and 13th for advance voting. That's my understanding. And October 17th is the voting day. So all I want you guys to do, and I hope you learned a lot from our candidates here and their positions and their answers to your questions. I want you to vote because municipal politics impacts us all. So let's make the right choices so we can have, the decisions made by the ones that will make us good. All right. Thank you all for watching.